Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's exploration of consumer markets and buyer behavior. I want to start with what might be the most counterintuitive business success story of the 21st century. In 2008, two broke roommates in San Francisco, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, had an idea that everyone told them was crazy. They wanted to convince people to sleep in strangers' homes instead of hotels. Not just any strangers, complete strangers they'd never met, whose backgrounds they didn't know, in neighborhoods they'd never visited. For thousands of years, human survival has depended on being cautious around strangers. Parents teach children, don't talk to strangers. We're wired to be suspicious of unfamiliar people and places. Yet somehow, these two roommates built a $75 billion company by getting millions of people to overcome this fundamental human instinct. Today, we're going to discover how Airbnb revolutionized consumer behavior and what their success teaches us about how consumers really make decisions. Let me put Airbnb's achievement in perspective. In 2008, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were literally broke. They were selling themed cereal boxes to pay rent. Their idea was simple, but seemed impossible. Create a platform where strangers could rent rooms to other strangers. By 2021, Airbnb reached a peak valuation of $75 billion. Today, they have over 4 million hosts worldwide and have facilitated more than 1 billion guest arrivals. Think about that number. 1 billion times, someone decided to trust a stranger with their safety and sleep in an unfamiliar home. The fundamental challenge was psychological. How do you convince people to override millions of years of evolutionary programming that says be cautious around strangers? How do you get someone to hand over money to someone they've never met for a place they've never seen? This is where consumer behavior theory becomes essential for understanding their success. Airbnb didn't just create a new business, they fundamentally changed consumer behavior patterns that had existed for decades. Traditional travel behavior was built on predictability and safety. Consumers booked branded hotels, specifically because they knew what to expect. A Marriott in Tokyo would be similar to a Marriott in New York. They paid premium prices for standardized experiences and professional service. Airbnb asked consumers to do the exact opposite. Trust strangers with your safety. Accept unpredictable experiences. Pay money up front to people you'd never met for places you'd only seen in photos. Sleep in someone else's bed. Use their kitchen. Follow their house rules. From a consumer behavior perspective, this represented a complete revolution in how people thought about travel accommodation. The question is, what factors made this psychological shift possible? To understand Airbnb's success, we need to examine the cultural context they launched into. Traditional culture had always emphasized, don't talk to strangers. Hotels represented safety through professional management and standardized service. People's homes were private spaces, not commercial accommodations. But by 2008, several cultural shifts were converging that created opportunities for companies like Airbnb. Social media was normalizing connections with strangers. People were already sharing personal information with unknown followers on Facebook and Twitter. The idea of connecting with strangers online was becoming culturally acceptable. Environmental consciousness was growing, and the sharing economy appealed to values about utilizing existing resources instead of building new ones. Why build more hotels when millions of spare rooms already existed? The experience economy was emerging, where consumers increasingly valued unique experiences over standardized ones. Younger consumers especially wanted authenticity and local immersion rather than generic travel experiences. The 2008 economic recession also created both supply and demand for alternative accommodations. People needed ways to save money on travel and earn extra income from their homes. Put this in the perspective of a tool we have discussed, the population pyramid. This cultural shift was rooted in a generational shift in the population in the United States. Airbnb's genius was understanding how to position themselves within these cultural shifts rather than fighting against traditional culture. Their belong anywhere messaging was psychologically brilliant. They didn't say, stay with strangers. They said, belong. They didn't emphasize the accommodation aspect. They emphasized the experience aspect. They weren't asking people to abandon safety concerns. They were offering a way to feel at home anywhere in the world. They positioned home sharing as cultural immersion rather than budget accommodation. Instead of competing with hotels on price and amenities, they competed on authenticity and local connection. This cultural positioning was especially powerful with millennials who valued experiences over possessions and authenticity over luxury. Airbnb aligned perfectly with the emerging cultural preference for unique, shareable experiences. Social factors were crucial for Airbnb's adoption because trust is fundamentally a social construct. You can't create trust through advertising. You need social proof and community verification. Airbnb's early adopters were young, tech-savvy travelers who were already comfortable with social media and online communities. These early adopters became opinion leaders, sharing their positive experiences and influencing their social networks. The platform created multiple social proof mechanisms. User reviews worked both ways. Guests reviewed hosts, and hosts reviewed guests. This created accountability on both sides. Social media integration allowed users to see which of their friends had stayed at specific properties. The Superhost program created a status hierarchy that motivated hosts to provide excellent experiences. Local community recommendations made hosts feel like neighborhood ambassadors rather than just accommodation providers. Influencers and travel bloggers began featuring unique Airbnb properties, making home sharing aspirational rather than just economical. But Airbnb also had to overcome significant social barriers that went beyond just platform features. Many potential users faced social pressure from family and friends who thought staying with strangers was unsafe or inappropriate. Parents who had taught their children don't talk to strangers were concerned about their adult children using Airbnb. There was also social stigma around the perception that using Airbnb meant you couldn't afford proper hotels. Some travelers worried that choosing Airbnb would reflect poorly on their social status. Airbnb addressed these concerns through comprehensive verification systems. Users could verify their identity through government IDs, social media profiles, and phone numbers. Detailed profiles with photos and personal information made hosts feel like real people rather than anonymous strangers. When celebrities and high-profile individuals began using and endorsing Airbnb, it eliminated the stigma around home sharing. If successful people were choosing Airbnb for experiences rather than budget reasons, it became socially acceptable for everyone. The result? These solutions made staying with strangers socially acceptable and even aspirational. Personal factors created distinct user segments for Airbnb, each with different motivations and needs. Initially, Airbnb's primary users were ages 25 to 40, college-educated, middle to upper middle class, concentrated in urban tech-savvy markets. This demographic was comfortable with technology, open to new experiences, and motivated by both economic and experiential factors. But as the platform matured, different life stages created different use cases. Young professionals were budget conscious and experience seeking, using Airbnb to travel longer or more frequently than they could afford with the hotels. Families discovered that Airbnb properties offered space, kitchen facilities, and neighborhood settings that hotels couldn't match. They could stay in residential areas, cook their own meals, and experience destinations like locals rather than tourists. Empty nesters began using Airbnb for authentic cultural experiences. With grown children and higher discretionary income, they valued unique properties and local connections over standardized hotel experiences. Airbnb succeeded by serving 5 distinct lifestyle segments, each using the platform for different reasons. Budget travelers used Airbnb to stretch their dollars, enabling longer trips or better locations than they could afford with hotels. Experience seekers wanted authentic local experiences, staying in neighborhoods where locals lived, getting recommendations from hosts who knew the area intimately. Family groups needed space, multiple bedrooms, and kitchen facilities that hotels either didn't offer or charged premium prices for. Business travelers, especially for extended stays, preferred the comfort and amenities of home-like environments. Adventure travelers sought unique properties that hotels couldn't offer: treehouses, castles, boats, unusual architectural designs. These properties became destinations in themselves. The key insight for marketers is that the same platform served completely different consumer needs and motivations. Airbnb succeeded by being flexible enough to meet diverse lifestyle requirements. Airbnb's psychological appeal operated at multiple levels of human motivation, which helps explain its broad adoption across different consumer segments. This is Maslow's hierarchy. Above physiological needs, at the safety level, Airbnb had to overcome fundamental security concerns. They addressed this through comprehensive verification systems, host and guest insurance, and 24/7 customer support. The platform made staying with strangers feel safer than it would be without systematic protections. Social needs were met through connections with local hosts and communities. Many users reported that host interactions were highlights of their travel experiences, getting local recommendations, learning about neighborhood culture, feeling welcomed into a community. Esteem needs were satisfied through social media sharing of unique travel experiences. Staying in distinctive Airbnb properties became a way to signal sophistication, adventurousness, and cultural awareness to social networks. Self-actualization needs were met through authentic cultural immersion and personal growth experiences. Many users described Airbnb stays as transformative, offering deeper cultural understanding than traditional tourism. The psychological barriers Airbnb overcame were significant. Fear of strangers became trust through transparency. Fear of the unknown became excitement through detailed information, and fear of problems became confidence through insurance and support systems. Airbnb's success required careful management of consumer perceptions at every touchpoint. Selective attention was captured through beautiful photography that made listings irresistible. The company invested heavily in helping hosts take professional quality photos because they understood that visual appeal was crucial for breaking through perceptual filters. The Airbnb name itself, originally Airbed and Breakfast, suggested hospitality and comfort rather than just cheap accommodation. The app design emphasized photos over text, allowing properties to sell themselves visually. Selective distortion was addressed by anticipating and countering negative interpretations. Safety concerns were met with comprehensive review systems and verification processes. Quality concerns were addressed through photography standards and host education. Legitimacy concerns were countered with insurance policies and professional customer support. Selective retention was managed by ensuring that positive experiences were easy to share on social media, while negative experiences were quickly addressed through customer support systems. The company understood that word of mouth could make or break their reputation. Let's trace a typical consumer through Airbnb's buyer decision process, starting with need recognition. Internal stimuli often involved desires for travel experiences, budget constraints that made traditional hotels less attractive, or specific needs like extended stays or group accommodations that hotels couldn't serve well. External stimuli were frequently social. Friends sharing amazing Airbnb experiences on social media, travel blog recommendations, or economic incentives like lower costs or better value propositions. The key insight is that need recognition for Airbnb was often about the experience rather than just accommodation. Consumers weren't just looking for a place to sleep, they were looking for a way to experience destinations authentically. This experiential need recognition differentiated Airbnb from traditional accommodation booking, where the primary need was usually just a clean, safe place to stay. The information search process for Airbnb was more extensive than traditional hotel booking because consumers were evaluating unfamiliar properties and unknown hosts. Information sources included the Airbnb app and website, with detailed listings, guest reviews and host profiles, social media posts from friends and influencers, and travel blogs and recommendation sites. Evaluation criteria were more complex than traditional hotel selection. Safety factors included host verification, guest reviews, and neighborhood research. Value considerations involved comparing prices to hotel alternatives while accounting for included amenities like kitchens and laundry. Experience factors focused on uniqueness, local character, and potential host interactions. Convenience factors included location relative to destinations, check-in processes, and house rules. The evaluation process often involved extensive review reading and property comparison, reflecting the high involvement nature of the decision. The final booking decision was influenced by both rational and emotional factors. Positive influences included detailed, authentic guest reviews that provided social proof, responsive host communication that built trust, clear photos, and property descriptions that set appropriate expectations, and competitive pricing compared to hotel alternatives. Potential barriers included safety concerns about specific neighborhoods, unclear or restrictive house rules, poor host response time that suggested potential communication problems, and hidden fees or charges that made the actual cost higher than expected. Situational factors often drove final decisions. Group size requirements that hotels couldn't accommodate, special occasions where unique properties added value, or length of stay where Airbnb offered better value for extended trips. The purchase decision process revealed the high involvement nature of Airbnb bookings compared to routine travel accommodation choices. Post-purchase behavior determined whether users became repeat customers and advocates or one-time experimenters. Satisfaction drivers included properties that matched photos and descriptions, positive host interactions that provided local insights, smooth check-in and check-out processes, and the overall feeling of living like a local rather than just visiting. Cognitive dissonance risks included safety concerns during stays, properties that didn't match expectations, host communication problems, or neighborhood issues that made guests uncomfortable. The post-purchase experience was crucial because Airbnb's business model depended on repeat usage and word-of-mouth recommendations. Satisfied guests typically became enthusiastic advocates, sharing experiences on social media and recommending Airbnb to friends and family. Negative experiences, however, could create lasting aversion, not just to specific properties, but to the entire home sharing concept. The textbook categorizes consumer buying behavior by involvement and differences across products. Airbnb represents complex buying behavior, high consumer involvement with significant perceived differences among alternatives. High involvement stemmed from multiple factors: significant cost, safety implications of staying with strangers, importance of accommodation to overall travel experience. Significant differences were obvious when comparing Airbnb to traditional hotels, homes versus commercial properties, unique experiences versus standardized service, and variable quality versus consistent standards. This complexity meant consumers engaged in extensive research, careful evaluation of alternatives, and thorough post-purchase assessment. It also meant that Airbnb needed educational marketing to help consumers understand and evaluate the home sharing concept. The complex buying behavior pattern explained why Airbnb's adoption was gradual initially, but accelerated as positive experiences created social proof and reduced perceived risk. Airbnb had to guide consumers through the complete new product adoption process because home sharing was an entirely new concept for most people. Traditional barriers included lack of awareness about what home sharing even meant, skepticism about why someone would choose a stranger's home over a professional hotel, legitimate safety concerns about staying with unknown hosts, uncertainty about the experience quality, and questions about legitimacy and legal protections. Airbnb's solutions were systematic. They educated consumers about the home sharing concept through content marketing and PR. They built interest through showcasing unique properties and authentic experiences. They addressed evaluation concerns through comprehensive information, reviews, and verification systems. They made trial easy through user-friendly booking processes and customer support. They encouraged adoption through superior experiences that exceeded expectations and created loyal advocates. The key was reducing perceived risk at each stage while highlighting unique benefits that traditional accommodation couldn't offer. Airbnb's adoption followed classic diffusion patterns across 5 consumer categories. Innovators, about 2.5%, were tech entrepreneurs, adventure travelers, and budget backpackers who were already comfortable with risk and eager to try new concepts. Early adopters, 13.5%, were young urban professionals and experience-focused millennials who valued authenticity over luxury. Crucially, they became opinion leaders, sharing their experiences on social media and influencing their networks. Early mainstream consumers, 34%, included budget-conscious families and business travelers who adopted after seeing social proof and wider availability. Late mainstream, 34%, encompassed older travelers and luxury travelers who eventually recognized unique value propositions that hotels couldn't match. Laggards, 16%, remained committed to traditional hotels. Airbnb's strategy-focused marketing resources on innovators and early adopters whose social media posts and word-of-mouth recommendations influenced later categories. 5 key characteristics determined how quickly Airbnb spread globally. Relative advantage was clear for motivated consumers: lower costs, more space, authentic local experiences, and unique properties that hotels couldn't offer. Compatibility required some behavior change, but aligned with emerging social media culture where sharing experiences was valued and connecting with strangers was increasingly normal. Complexity was minimized through intuitive app design, clear booking processes that made home sharing accessible to mainstream consumers. Trialability was excellent. Consumers could easily try Airbnb once without major commitment, and positive experiences led to adoption. Observability was perhaps Airbnb's greatest strength. Home sharing experiences were highly shareable on social media, creating viral marketing that no advertising budget could match. The combination of clear advantages, social media compatibility, and high shareability enabled rapid global expansion once the concept gained initial traction. So what does Airbnb's success teach us about consumer behavior and marketing strategy? Their key success factors were building comprehensive trust systems through reviews, verification, and insurance that overcame safety barriers, timing their launch when sharing economy values were emerging culturally, leveraging user-generated content that was more powerful than traditional advertising, and focusing on selling experiences rather than just accommodation. The consumer behavior principles they demonstrated are applicable far beyond travel. First, psychological barriers can be overcome with proper systems and social proof. Second, cultural shifts create opportunities for innovative businesses that align with emerging values. Third, social factors often drive adoption more powerfully than product features alone. Fourth, post-purchase experience determines long-term success more than initial marketing. Airbnb succeeded by understanding that consumer behavior operates at multiple levels simultaneously and by systematically addressing cultural, social, personal, and psychological factors that influenced their target consumers. The second part of this week's lecture is on business markets, and we'll explore how business buying differs fundamentally from consumer buying. The slide lists the key concepts from the Consumer Markets chapter that you should read the textbook and master. Thanks for joining me today. Remember, every time you choose where to stay when traveling, you're demonstrating these consumer behavior principles in action. See you in the next video.